Hi, everybody. Welcome to Amplify DEI. And this is the summit where you'll learn everything about diversity, equity, inclusion, not only from me, but also from 91 other speakers who are residing all over the world. And now we are having a conversation about Amplify inclusive leadership. So, on introducing the speaker. So Hilary Richters, she is a director and lead digital ethics at Deloitte. Martin Mason is the founder of Unleashed International, and Stefan Tonnon is the VP HR inside EMEA, and Peter Griffiths is a leadership coach and creativity catalyst. So when I talk about amplifying inclusive leadership, Peter, what is an essential ingredient to amplify this?
Listening springs to mind, I think, is the first thing that
Mm-hmm.
I see listening as something a leader or all of us can develop. And that's the gateway to trust and building psychological safety with your people and your teams.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to listening, because I'm listening to you, but there are different ways of listening, right? What type of listening are you talking about? Because I know, but do the audience know that?
No, that's a really good question. I hear a lot about active listening, but that can
Mm-hmm.
be a double-edged sword because I'm just saying show up and just listen to the pulse of your people. Just be curious about what's going on. And you'd be
Mm.
surprised at what you pick up. And then because you are listening to those people, therefore, like I said before, you'll end up with a lot more trust being built. You'll cultivate relationships a lot better. And dare I say, you'll know what's going on versus
Mm.
second guessing people or thinking you know what's happening.
I love that. Thank you for sharing. And Hillary, what kind of spice do you want to add into amplifying inclusive leadership?
So now you're challenging me. No, for me as inclusive leader is the most important thing is to realize that you have biases
Mm.
and that you don't know everything about
Mm-hmm.
your employees, what they're doing, the situation, how they understand if you give them a task, realizing that it can be different. So for me, that's I think the most important ingredient. I have a lot more, but this one is the most important that I would add.
What tip can you share about realizing the bias? What would you recommend leaders to do?
So for me, one is be open.
Mm-hmm.
One. Secondly, ask, to understand if you are on the same page.
Yeah.
Because that's really talking about that you not say something about apples and he understand about, I don't know, tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
And I also truly believe that as a leader, it's even the best thing to be vulnerable because, leader is just a word, but in basic, I'm a human, I'm a woman, I'm a black woman, I'm a sister and all the other things. And a leader is it's just a word.
Yeah.
So I think going back to that basics is one of the most important things to understand the biases, that you have biases and act on that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And Martin.
Yeah, building on what Peter and Hilary have said, I think for me, collaboration is one of the key things that really moves the dial on, particularly around inclusion. There's so many forums now to start having conversations, which is a really great place to start. But for me, we're all about action in our organisation of how are we going to
Mm-hmm.
remove systemic barriers to entry for for individuals in organisations. And so collaborating, networking, bringing people together around common challenges and problems. And to Hilary's point, coupling that with vulnerability to say, actually, we don't know, we don't have the answers to some of these problems, but let's all put our heads together and work out an innovative way to tackle them. So yeah, that would be the key thing for me.
Okay, when you talk about collaboration, one thing that people should know about me, I love talking about food. And since the previous conversation was about creating salads, right? We have tomatoes, we have cucumbers, we have onions. How can we collaborate in a way that we can create a tasty salad?
It's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
I would say, I think identifying the individual strengths and talents that each of us have to contribute towards that. So, to use your analogy of food there, each of those different ingredients adds something different, and understanding what you can personally add and contributing that into the melting pot is a great way to move the dial around inclusion.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you. And Stefan.
Yeah, when you're last, it's a little bit harder, I guess, because I agree with the three speakers before me. But if I think about the leadership and diversity, I think you need to be authentic and have a commitment to diversity. You need to be able to challenge the status quo, try and hold others accountable, and make diversity and inclusivity a personal priority, because then it will live through your leadership style and how you lead people. I think that if you don't have that and you don't have the commitment to diversity, then it's all words. And I like Peter with listening. I think that is one of the greatest leadership things that you need to have for yourself. And I always say, and Peter knows this, listen with your heart to truly understand before you actually respond. So listen to everybody that you work with, whether that's in your team, but also outside your team, and understand what they try to say before you respond, rather than just listening to respond.
Yeah, I love that. And do you mind sharing your personal commitment when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Yeah, I think I've been on a journey for the last probably even 10 years now. And I think COVID changed the world a little bit, that everybody is a little bit more humane in their leadership styles and had to approach our teammates and our employees a little bit differently than we did pre-COVID. I think most leaders are very comfortable in having people on desk and they can see who's there and who's not there. And therefore, leadership is a little bit top down. When we all went behind screens, it was a completely different world. We had to reach out to them. We got a good sight of where they actually live, particularly in the beginning when we didn't have any backgrounds. You had the disturbance of kids and all kinds of other things happening in their homes. And leaders suddenly needed to identify themselves with their teammates and their employees, and suddenly realizing that they have a hard time when they work from home. And therefore, questions that they asked should have been different when they were in the office versus behind the screen. And I think that's where diversity and inclusivity and a piece of belonging changed very rapidly over the last 2 years. And it's great. So it's one of the positive things that come out of COVID, that it has a lot of more attention and people are really interested in the topic. I think that one thing that I've learned is you don't need to be afraid to saying the wrong things, because we all have, like Hilary said, our own biases. So we all have our own backgrounds. We make mistakes, or we don't know what we don't know. And I've had that a couple of times when I was in a panel. I said something and I was challenged by another panelist, which is fantastic. I'm not afraid of that, because we learn from each other every single day.
Okay, now you're inviting everybody to challenge you. Is that, am I hearing that right? Okay. Let me start off with the following question then, because how can you all shared different ingredients, right? So I'll start with you, Stefan. How can leaders activate the ingredient that you mentioned to boost belonging in the workplace? Because some countries are beyond diversity and some countries are just starting with diversity, right? How can we activate these ingredients so that they reach towards belonging?
And that's a very good question. And even in my company, I see the differences between the UK and other countries in the north of Europe or in the southern piece of Europe. So there's differences there. I think it all starts with curiosity about others. So demonstrate that you have an open mindset and a deep curiosity about others. And again, listen without any judgment and try and find the empathy to understand the ones around you. And I think that's where diversity begins to grow and have people in that conversation. What I'm trying to do with my team as much as possible is have those conversations, no matter how hard they are, have those conversations, ask the questions, and try to motivate your teammates and your employees to ask the same questions that you are asking to others. And that's where it starts to almost go beyond what you believe in. People will adopt and then ask those questions as well. And that's where it all starts. But it's still, in companies, it needs to be, we need to have a platform from a leadership perspective before your teammates and employees start talking about it, because they need to know that this is a safe environment or as I learned last week, a brave environment where people can speak up.
True, because if leadership isn't activating this, then people will feel like they are walking on eggshells when they are initiating these DEI initiatives, right? And we all know that happiness is the key. I mean, I did a talk about happiness and how it connects with diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when I see the outcome of what Indeed did regarding the happiness index, but also the outcome of the Microsoft Workplace Trend Index, it's shocking to see that so many companies and leaders are not activating happiness and are focusing on different things than activating happiness. The great resignation, right? A lot of people are walking away right now from companies because they are missing some of these elements. And I want them to realize that there is time to stop this. There is time to prevent people from walking away from your company. So thank you. Martin.
It's similar to Stefan, really. So for me, I guess the slight nuance in that would be about talking about the learnings that you've got as leaders. So we're all constantly learning all the time. I think being vulnerable and sharing the fact that we're still learning and talking openly about what we're learning ourselves as leaders with our teams and with the communities we work with is really important to role model that, to show that actually we don't have all the answers and we're learning as much as everybody else with this.
True. And Hilary.
So yeah, now I understand what Stefan says when you come at the last, because everything is almost.
But you're not last.
Peter has a challenge.
So Peter has a challenge. So I know, but what I think is to add on everything is that be an ally to your team members. Because often you think we talk about you need to listen to them, but I also realized that not everybody speaks up for themselves always.
Yeah.
So you need to find other ways to have the conversations with them. Find this other route to connect. And be open to find that way. Yeah? For somebody, it will be big groups. For other people, it will be in small groups. One of the things that Corona did, especially in my case, I went to every team member's their house and have a walk around, safe walk, COVID rules, but I have a walk around where they live to understand not about the work, but to understand them, to understand what motivates them, what drives them, how their life look like, what do you do if you're not working. And when you find that moment of that connection, I think that's how you activate those ingredients to boost inclusiveness.
I love
And
that.
secondly, when we talk about leaders, I more see that myself that I'm here to facilitate my team. So not, I'm really there to facilitate them in every way that they need to be successful in the journey. So that's a little bit how I perceive my role.
Yeah, and what would you recommend for the leaders that are working remote, right? Because it's easy for you to walk around in the Netherlands with your team member, but what suggestion or tip do you have for the leaders that are working remote?
I had a colleague who was actually in another country, and we created what we call the WTO, walk together but alone. So we all went outside and had like video calls when we were walking around, but then we had the feeling that we were still walking together, and that that brings them out of the work environment. They saw me totally not in work clothes. So we both had that. So that we find on different ways to do so. And there are a lot of ways. And there are also colleagues who said, I don't want that, and respect that as well. And they will come back when they're ready for it.
Yeah. Thank you. And Peter?
Nothing else to say. I think you all covered it. No, I'm joking. No, but this is a great conversation, so thank you. I think misalignment springs to mind simply because quite often with the companies I support and work with, and actually when I was in leadership roles, I would hear the leadership team innocently and sometimes not so innocently saying certain things or giving D&I initiatives lip service.
Yeah.
only to find out when you actually go and see the reality of the day-to-day work, or you walk into a project team or a product team and they were like, yeah, I don't buy that because I don't see that in our leaders. So all I'm saying is it's not about hitting someone with a stick and saying that's wrong. Just be aware. I think Hilary touched on it earlier in the conversation. Just be curious about what you're unconscious about. And if someone gives you the feedback that you misalign, maybe there's a grain of truth, and explore that. Because I can put my hand up. There was times when I was misaligned by what I was saying, sometimes innocently, and I was actually getting the feedback. So I just showed up every day and I was like, okay, I'm listening. And also what we touched on before, be okay being vulnerable, because we don't have all the answers. I'm not an oracle. I've not met a leader yet that knows everything. And dare I say, your team will actually have all the answers without you actually going outside of your team. Or in many cases, I see, large multinationals going outside looking for consultancy and stuff like that, when the team are all going, I've got the answer, please listen to me.
True. I love the fact, and I want to highlight the feedback part, because for the people that know me, I think they have already heard this, but sometimes the Dutch people can be known for being direct, right? And sometimes the way that we share feedback, or that people share feedback, is they butcher somebody like they are in a horror movie like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and don't leave that person whole. Feedback can be shared constructive, right? Feedback is sharing an action, not making it personal, but sharing an action so that that person can learn from it. Feedback is leaving that person whole, not like Chucky. I know that, what is it? The horror day in the US. I'm forgetting that national day, but Halloween is coming. I don't want you to butcher people just like Halloween or the horror movies. I want you to keep people whole. That's a way for them to consume the feedback in a positive way, but also it leaves space to have these constructive conversations. Sometimes I do have to say that sometimes the feedback that is shared is harsh. And you have to realize a leader is a person as well, but also the person who shares feedback is a person as well.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you in that. Let me ask a different question on top of that, if you allow me. One thing that I hear a lot, not only around me, but also in my networks, is that it's very hard for leaders to speak up. Because every time that they speak up and they say something that might be controversial, they will get the comments, and the leader then gets into a defense mode. That the next time that they speak, they are extra careful, and therefore they lose their authenticity. And I had that in the beginning as well. So how would you deal with that, or how would you, maybe for Peter, because he's a leadership coach, how would you talk to a leader and say it's okay to make mistakes, but if you make mistakes in a wider audience, how do you make sure that you don't go into defense mode, but actually make it a learning moment? I think that's the question that I want to ask.
Yeah, well, you've just got to. I mean, we covered this. It's been aware of your own blind spots, and I can honestly say this: that every team I ever managed, or they all knew exactly my ticks and the stuff that I wasn't great at, right? And that's the thing. So usually the first thing I do when I'm working with someone on a one-to-one, like a leader, is just look at the basics. That's a foundation piece for me. So I'm just like, okay, what's happening right now? I'm super curious about, how you show up and what's going on. And as soon as I hear where they're at in terms of, how their awareness is, whether they're super comfortable or super uncomfortable, in quite often, that's usually the common, starting point, where I can't say to my team that I don't know. And I'm like, well, actually, if you don't, you will never have trust. You will never be able to build psychological safety. But I don't just say that out the gate. I lovingly work with them. It takes a bit of patience and TLC. But what we do is we get to the bottom of the truth of it, as Stefan said. And it's just like, okay, so this is what really works and this is what doesn't work, and what you'll get feedback on. And I know what you're saying, Vivian, about getting harsh feedback. I mean, I got lots in my career, but I always was, I would try not to react in the first place, because we're all emotional human beings, right? And I reacted. I could trust you, right? I could assure you I did that. But when you reflect, and when you actually, maybe go outside the office, or you wait to react or anything, what you find is, okay, well, that could have been delivered a lot more lovingly and with a lot more empathy or compassion, but actually they're right. to a certain degree. Okay, let's fix that. So what I would do is go to the person one-on-one and say, wow, that was a little bit harsh, but you know what? You're super right. So thank you. But, you know, if you're going to deliver that again and it's not on me, this is generally how you do it. But I tend not to talk about feedback tools because there's so many and it's so confusing. I'd rather get the feedback super harsh, because trust me, if a leader's getting no feedback, there's a real problem.
Yeah.
And that's when there's no safety, no trust, and you dare I say there's a toxic environment there.
That's true. I do have to add something to that because what I feel is missing in the workplace, we talk a lot about failures, but without failing, we wouldn't have the light bulb. Without failing, we wouldn't have the car. Without failing, we wouldn't have the space ship that is going outside of the earth right now. So what I'm trying to say, if my son, when at the age of 4, can call out his parents saying that it's a fixed mindset, meaning that at the school, at the early stage in the school, they started to prep the kids about learning about fixed mindsets and growth mindset. So if my son can learn that, why is it so challenging to bring that growth mindset and fixed mindset teachings to the workplace? I feel like that's the start for acknowledging that a person isn't perfect, for acknowledging that a leader isn't perfect. And yes, they can make mistakes, but how will the leader respond to that? How will they react to that? There needs to be a training or awareness on both parties, both ends, to understand that we are all in this to learn and to activate our growth mindset.
Can I
Of
can I
course.
answer that? So I totally agree. But if I look where, for example, when I started 13 years ago, especially at Deloitte, that is a high performing company, or they say that they are, is actually when I started at Deloitte, every leader looked perfect. There were no imperfect leaders. That was also
Yeah.
part of the culture, and I don't think that was only within Deloitte. I think that was everywhere in corporate life. So if you only see perfect leaders, then you also learn how to be perfect. And there is no room for to be imperfect. So that's on one hand. Secondly, especially in corporate life, I'm talking a little bit of corporate life, showing imperfections also can have impact on other things. It can have impact on your net revenue, or it's an answer because you didn't make your net revenue. It's an answer to whatever everyone's take in account. So it's not only about giving feedback or the growth or the fixed mindset. There are a lot of other things that that comes with that. And what you see now, actually, to be honest, also what I see in Deloitte now, that there is room for leaders to be imperfect. So changing with the ask of the new generations that say, I want to see vulnerable leaders, because that's the way we grow. Because like you said, that's the way that we get the car and etc. And digitalization helps also a lot with that. But I also think that's also part of it, why it's so difficult. And to based on a little bit on giving that feedback, it's not only about giving what didn't went well, but it's also about telling them what did go well. No one makes everything worse, or not everything is bad what somebody is doing. So it's a way as a leader, actually, of everyone to can tell both sides of the of of the ring, the good things and the bad things. So one of the things that I do with everyone, it doesn't matter if you're a work student or you're a partner, if I give feedback, I tell you the good and the bad, in short, but I always ask, give me feedback. And especially for the younger one, it's the way that they need to learn to give feedback to leaders as well. And that's okay, because I think that's the only way to teach them around the journey, especially if I look to my own journey.
Yeah, that's a valuable lesson, especially I never learned giving feedback at school or giving feedback at work. So a majority of the people don't know how to give feedback. So that's definitely a valuable lesson. Thank you, Hilary. And Martin.
I agree with everything Hilary's just said. And I think you both, Vivian and Peter, your points around fixed versus growth mindset's very interesting. So we've done quite a lot of work with leaders around that, because that is one of the key ingredients to getting people to identify where they've got gaps around their own self-awareness. And until you tackle that, then trying to have more detailed feedback conversations or trying to educate people around inclusion particularly then becomes quite challenging. So that's a really great starting point for doing that. I think my take on this is consistent with everyone else's, really. It's about leading with vulnerability. And I think also being able to talk openly about your own learning and think about how you're showing up to your team. So one of our core values at Unleashed is around innovation and challenging the status quo. So if we're having meetings all the time, whether that's with clients or with each other, and we're all in violent agreement, we kind of hold ourselves to account and go, well, we can't be challenging the status quo and we can't be being innovative right now. So is there a different perspective? Is there something else we haven't considered? Who else can we go and talk to get a different take on this? And when we do that, it's really uncomfortable to go and expose yourself to somebody else and talk about, actually, we're thinking about doing this. We don't know if we've got it right, but what do you think? And then critique that. But it's the only way you're going to learn and innovate around any practice, whether that's, leadership, inclusion, general workplace, practices. We have to get uncomfortable and expose ourselves to people that are different to us to get that take. I think a really good example of that actually is the beauty sector. So it's an industry that hasn't really changed a great deal. Certainly its practices over the last kind of 20 to 30 years. And it's fun. I was having a conversation with somebody about this the other day where they talked about the rise of Rihanna's Fenty company, and they couldn't understand how it had been so successful. And I said, well, if you think about it, she's been very clever with this because she's developed a brand that caters to darker skin tones, something that none of the major players had even considered. And you think of the size of demographic of people that her product appeals to. You've got players like, Garnier and L'Oreal and others that absolutely dominated the global market, but no one around that senior table was thinking about the perspective of those customers. And so you've got a new business that's become $1 billion industry, practically overnight, really. And it just shows you the power of innovation and that diversity of thought around a table. If you start to think like the communities that you're interacting with, the possibilities are endless.
True. Stefan, is your question answered?
Yeah, it is.
Or do you have something else to add into what everybody was sharing?
Yeah, a little bit on top of what Martin is saying and what Hilary was saying. I mean, I'm a white middle-aged man, so I'm a little bit older than most of you probably. And when I became the first-time manager, it was a man's world. And my education in leadership has been completely different than it is today.
Yeah.
But we also need to admit that we still have a very male-dominant leadership culture around us in most of the industries. Luckily, it's changing. Fortunately, it's changing, and discussions are opening up. But we still have a lot of white privileged middle-aged men that want to keep the old leadership style going. And I think that fighting that and standing up against that is one of our biggest missions. I mean, most of the employees or working people understand that your work environment needs to become more of the environment of the community that you work in, and therefore it's very diverse. It's like one big melting pot. But if we go a couple of layers higher, it's very hard to see that difference because they still live in that privileged world. You can see the surveys that go out there and how many of the CEOs worldwide, if you look at the pictures, most of them are still white males. So there's still a lot of things to do, particularly in leadership, to shift that model, because it comes a little bit back to what I said earlier. Leadership needs to support the diversity agenda. Otherwise, underneath in a company or in the corporate world, it doesn't change.
True. And I do have a comment about the gender diversity, which will be a talk, I think tomorrow or Wednesday, but know that the live panel about gender diversity will cater to that, because it seems now that gender diversity is only focused on women. There are different genders, but I'll leave the yummy stuff for the next panel. Regarding the question, right? How are you challenging yourself when it comes to inclusive leadership? What can people learn from you, Hilary?
What I do is speak up. What I see is still that there's a lot of silence, especially in the category, Stefan, you were talking about. There are middle-aged white men because of the environment that they work on. it's about speaking up. I truly believe that, and it's that our voice is our biggest asset to make this change. And at this moment, I don't believe that this biggest asset is used for the full potential. So what I'm doing actually is speak up, and I challenge everyone. It doesn't matter if you're the CEO or you're a working student. Speak up, and I hope others will do as well. That they see in me an ally, and that they feel if I speak up and they're going to be, people don't like me, I know for sure that Hilary will back me up. And that's what I do with everybody. I will back everybody up who speak up within the organization.
Yeah. And I do, as a person who is receiving the law from Hilary, I do have to add something to that, because there is a misconception about speaking up, saying you did this and you did that. There is also a way of strategically speak up.
Oh,
the
yes.
way that Hilary is doing, she is strategic about speaking up when, who, what, where, and being respectful as well.
Oh, yes, of course. And also, have that mirror in front of them. I think I see for my work every week, I see, presentations, panel discussions coming by. And then I look at who will be the panel members. And then I send them an email back and I ask friendly to make it a little bit more diverse. And if I know people, you can also think about that, and that people. And then they say, oh, yes, of course. And then the panel will be diverse. So it's also, sometimes, I don't know why, but it slips people's attention to do so.
It's not nature yet, or it's not a custom thing to do. And I do believe that we need to support people to remind them.
Yeah.
Did you think about this? Did you do that? So Hilary did initiated something beautiful within Deloitte Netherlands, where Deloitte Netherlands now has a panel promise because of her and her team, but she's the face behind this panel promise. So this is a huge win for Deloitte as well. So thank you.
Yes.
Martin.
Building on what Hilary just said, I think, and your point around strategically asking the question, our philosophy has always been it's the Franklin Covey quote of seek first to understand and then to be understood. So we genuinely try to find out what's the barrier, or where do people feel there's a sticking point around a particular view that they have around inclusion. And normally when you unpick that, the situation's never quite as big as it seems. So case in point, we were having conversations with an organization who was having some challenges between two groups of individuals, both kind of infighting around gender identity. And actually, when we managed to get them to listen to each other and stop the kind of finger wagging at each camp, they realized that they were actually fighting for the same things, but they were just conveying it in a very different way. And I think just being able to facilitate those conversations and seek to understand enables good dialogue and people to learn, and creates that psychological safety. And kind of building on that is role modeling, really. I see so many people say to me all the time, it's not possible to find diverse talent, or we can't get representation in X, Y, and Z. And I don't subscribe to tokenism, but when organizations tell me things can't be done, we make it our mission to go and do it. And it just kind of spurs me on more to want to go and break down some of these barriers, then go, well, we've just done it, so what's stopping you? So I think that I feel like I might have slightly replicated Hilary's point, but I think it's a valid point, Hilary.
No, definitely. And given that we are in a day and age where we have different platforms, indeed, we have LinkedIn, we have Google, the comment of we can't find them should not be said anymore in this age right now.
No.
So can I challenge that a little bit, Vivian?
Oh, you want to add spice? Okay, come on.
No. Because, of course, I hate the comment, there's no diverse talent to be found. If you don't try, you will never find them. So have you tried it? And then if the answer is, I tried, but I couldn't find them, then for me, it's okay. But there are always two sides that needs to change.
True.
Also, underrepresented groups really need to make a change in finding the middle way.
True.
And to be honest, and I'm not going to be famous on this, but that's also sometimes that there are big steps on that side that needs to be taken as well. So
True.
it's not only the group that of the organizations, or sorry, Stefan, I'm going to use it now, and a white middle-aged man that needs to change. It's also the underrepresented groups that needs to make a change. And
True.
on both sides, we really
Yeah,
need to make steps, and we're not
yeah.
there yet.
Both sides need to unlearn a lot. That I
Indeed.
totally agree. I totally agree. Thank you.
You don't have
Stefan.
to be sorry in stating that, Hilary, because I'm the white middle-aged man.
He's not the only white man here.
I normally wouldn't say it, but because you started that
It's true. So, I'm not ashamed of that. It's just simply true. It's stating a fact.
I'm bringing it to the previous question. So the question was, how are you challenging yourself when it comes to inclusive leadership? What can people learn from you, Stefan?
Well, I'm challenging my own biases.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very aware of my biases, and I think 10 seconds before I respond, I always think about the situation before I respond to something.
Mm-hmm.
Make me better in understanding different viewpoints, and make me better into responding to certain situations. Most importantly, I think that I'm a supporter of diversity and inclusion. I like to be a champion, but I never call myself a champion because I think that there's so much still to learn and so much still to do in this area. I wish we were there, but we're certainly not there. This movement has just started, and I,
Mm-hmm.
we're just at the beginning. We still have a lot of steps to go before we all feel that we were in a better place where companies and societies are much more diverse and inclusive than they are today. So for me, it's learning every single day. For me, the last year, I stepped out of my comfort zone and have these panel discussions and be out there. And I like to be challenged, and I like to be proven wrong, because I learn that way. And it's that feedback loop that I get from others, and in being like this summit and other summits that I go to is where I really learn. And then I try to reflect that on my own biases and see how I can use that for my company, but also in my private life. And I think that is what I try to do. I think that if you believe in diversity, inclusivity, and belonging, then start supporting it. Try and read up about it. Try to listen to summits like this, and if you believe in that we're trying to do the right thing, then apply it. Become, like Hilary said, become an ally. Speak up, because that's the only way that we can move this organization forward.
Thank you for sharing that. And Peter, you are nodding your head.
Yeah,
What?
I mean, yeah, I agree with what's been said, but just to be clear, not in a feedback loop, because I don't, I think, how can I put this clearly? I mean, what we're all doing is just putting our money where our mouth is, right? It's as simple as that. So for me, I have two podcasts. One which talks about really diverse topics, same name as my business, The Mind Takeaway. And the second one, which is actually only 8 episodes in, is me as the white privileged male, nearly middle-aged. I'm not far off, I'm guessing, Steph, because I know we know each other as well. There's a Muslim lady who lives in Washington who converted to Islam just before 9/11, and my partner and business partner who was a refugee. So it's quite a good little mix, and nothing is off the table. And I can assure you that every week, every month we do a live, or we actually record a podcast episode, I'm completely uncomfortable. I'm like, what do I know about this in my position as this privileged person who's never had that, shared experience? And I learn a hell of a lot from it. Also, I shared with you, Vivian, another thing that I'm starting to do now, which again, I'm a bit uncomfortable but excited about, is I'm now going to mentor for the European Innovation Council for a women leadership program. So I can announce that now, because they've been telling me I couldn't say anything for weeks and stuff. So.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I have a few comments coming in. So Mira, Peter's wife, is sharing great conversation. Thank you, everyone. And also Nancy Kasvosvi, she's sharing, loving the panel and the openness that these panelists are sharing. So many gems, and also other people are sharing. Love the conversation by excellent leaders of the industry, great insights. And Taboho, one of the speakers of Amplify DEI, is asking a question to anyone. Would making a business case for diversity, an example that it improves innovation, that markets are diverse, improve the corporate acceptance of diversity.
I'm happy to take that one if you want, Vivian.
Yeah.
We did that with a client last year, actually, that was perhaps a little bit more traditional in their approach, shall we say.
Mm-hmm.
They were really struggling to see the business case for investing in a more inclusive workplace, which we found baffling. But so we tried to approach it with a very data-led mindset of, okay, what matters to this company? What drives them? What gets them out of bed in the morning? And the commercials were a really big thing for them. So we did quite a lot of research, pulled together existing research papers that existed in the marketplace using, sources like McKinsey and others, for example. And we were able to demonstrate to them that actually, if they improved diversity within their organization and inclusion, what that would look like for their EBITDA results. And when they started to see the size of opportunity that could create for them, it really changed the conversation. And they've since gone on to do some incredible things over the last 18 months. But it did need that kind of financial catalyst early doors to get them to think more broadly about what does this give us apart from a societal benefit. So yeah, I do think there's merit with some organizations, not for every, but for some, yes.
True. I agree with what you say, but sometimes also this question is the business case question is being asked as a boomerang, sending you back into your loophole. Like, you need to investigate, we don't have the time. And then when you have that business case, then something else comes up, right? So I want you to be aware, what is the reason why they want the business case? What can you do? What are the low-hanging fruits that you can cover in this business case to prove that diversity is a way for the company to win?
Can I add another angle to that?
Yeah.
That's also a little bit where I'm working on. And when you talk about the responsible and ethical use of data and technology, and that's all about trust. And trust when using data solutions is actually now has a take in the boardroom of organizations.
Yeah.
So I don't talk about what does diversity brings. I talk about, if you don't make diversity a priority when creating solutions, you have another big problem.
Yeah.
So it's not talking about diversity as such, but to talk about the trustworthiness of data solutions. And then you see, we need to do something about it, because if I look to my developers team, they are the same type of people. If I look to the people who bring it to market, are the same type of people. And what other additions can we do? So you see now, also from that angle, not calling it diversity because that's a totally different topic, you see also changing happen. Not fast enough for us, but we do see the changes. And that is really a business case, because that's actually my bread now every day.
It's like bringing in DEI in stealth mode, where you go undercover, bringing it in under a different label, but still under the hood. It is DEI, but then again, it talks about losing money or winning new perspective or winning new clients. So I like that. I like that.
Yeah.
Stefan?
Yeah, I know that companies work like that. I'm not always sure if I like it. To challenge it a little bit, because there are still business parameters that you go after to get there. And I understand, we'll change the world with it, because we still have to talk to those businesses that think like that.
True.
I like to think that companies have true values and build their culture based on those values. And I'm very fortunate I didn't create the values in my company, but we have the values hunger, heart, and harmony that everybody lives throughout the company. They join us because of our values and build their culture around it. So everything that we do is based on those values. We have programs around it. It comes back into our performance reviews that we do once a year, or every quarter, sorry. So I like to believe that companies want to do the right thing for the right reasons, and that will make the true difference, because people want to join, and that's where the piece of belonging comes to. People want to belong to a company like that because they can bring their true self to the company, and therefore can perform in a way that I've never thought was possible. And that's where, growth mindset and all kinds of other things come from. And I truly understand, Martin works with corporations and companies like that, and Hilary knows that from the background as well, that we have companies that we have to prove the model on why diversity is going to help the P&Ls or the EFO or the EBITDA in longer terms. But I still like to believe, and maybe I'm too romantic for that, that companies build values that really want to do good for this world.
They are out there. They are
Yeah, but
out there.
do you know what the challenge is a little bit, Stefan? And I truly believe that it's really good at your company. All companies has almost the same values and principles on the highest level. Only when, when it is cascaded down, you don't see anything about it anymore. So
No, and I agree, and I talk about that a lot with, when I do panel discussions or I speak with my teammates in my company. A lot of those values are those nice posters on the wall, but they don't mean anything. And again, I'm fortunate that I chose a company where those values really mean something. We have value winners. We talk about it every decision that we take. And in COVID, you need to take plenty of decisions are all based on our value system. And maybe our company is unique, and there's luckily enough companies that do the same way. But I agree with you. There's a lot of companies that build those fantastic values, spend tons of money to marketing agencies to get value on the wall, but then don't live it because they have shareholders and profit to make. I fully understand that.
True. And Peter.
I'm just listening to the conversation. I agree with everything that's been raised. Just one thing's missing, that when I think about the companies that I've been working with and the ones that are not quite ready, it all boils back down to awareness. If someone's asking me to sell it to them, they're probably not going to be my clients, if I'm honest, because they're just not ready. And that's not to say close the door. I always keep the door open, because I know that humans, the psychology of it, let's be honest, they have to go through significant pain as an organization until they're willing to say, I've had enough. Actually, I want to have a chat with you. And for me, it's just getting curious about, are they actually at that stage? Because honestly, considering what we've all gone through in the last 18, 20 months or whatever it was, there shouldn't be any, let's sell it to the organization. It's not a nice to have. If you look at, there's a lot of labels like regenerative leadership. It's really simple. If you really want to look at the metrics without overcomplicating it, look at your recruitment strategy, look at your exit strategy, how many people are leaving the company. And as Hilary said, is it a feedback loop of white privileged males in the C-suite, or is there a decent set of diverse people? And not just about looks, let's be honest. What about divergent thinking? I think Stefan touched on it earlier. We need ideas, we need innovation. If you want novel ideas to become amazing products, we need to be listening, like I said before, to everyone in the organization. And I don't know, from my side, I just don't buy, let's build a business model around it, because it's actually topsy-turvy in my world. But again, I'm just curious what you all think about that.
Thank you for sharing. I want to be mindful of the time and also want to make an announcement. So can you maybe share 2 words that you want leaders to learn from being an inclusive leader? And I'll start with Hilary.
Just 2 words?
Yeah, 2 words. Okay, maybe 3.
So I would say, speak up, break the silence, and be an ally.
Thank you. Martin.
For me, it would be vulnerability and innovation.
Thank you. Stefan?
I would say be curious.
Only one?
Yeah, I want to keep it short. I want to stay with 2 words.
Peter?
Listening and, I guess, compassion.
Thank you. I have something amazing to announce, and I accidentally showed my screen, but I want to announce 2 champions. So during this whole orchestrating of the Amplify DEI Summit, there was an opportunity to nominate people for the Inclusive Leadership Award. I have 3 categories, and today's category is champion. And Ruben Brava has been nominated, and Anu Mandapari has been nominated, and they have won. And I just want to celebrate them for being a true leader. I've received different comments, different replies from different people, and I just want to say a shout out to them for being the champion of 2021 of the Amplify DEI Inclusive Leadership Award. So thank you all for watching this episode, and thank you all for sharing your amazing insights. It's been a blessing to be sitting at this table, and also hard to be a moderator at this table, because sometimes I just want to listen to all what you have been sharing. So thank you all for sharing that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.